let's talk about Foreordained by Aaron N. Hall. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's review is Foreordained by Aaron N. Hall. This is a YA classic epic fantasy filled with friendship and learning and a touch of very clean teenage romance. Before we jump into the review today, make sure you're checking out the description box down below for links to my social media and Discord should you want to come along for the ride. What I will say straight off the bat about Foreordained is that it was a very simple premise which was quite well executed and easy to read. I had a really good time with this YA book, even though it may not be to everyone's tastes. Foreordained follows 17-year-old Jason, who has grown up in what is effectively the lower part of the city. He is working as a blacksmith, creating weapons for both the lower and upper classes, and has seen all walks of life during his time. The vast differences about how the upper and lower class live and are treated are blatantly apparent in this story. Throughout his time and whilst working in this profession, he has seen incredible hardships of the other city dwellers during King Barnabas's reign. From consistently raising the taxes and people struggling to make ends meet, to public beatings, and people have had enough and are desperate for a new king to take the throne. King Barnabas is seemingly quite a cruel king compared to the last king that these people had. Little do the people know that Jason has been foreordained to be the next king, only he doesn't really understand why, and at 17 doesn't want that responsibility. Jason fights this new role for so long. He has known about this for a few years, and it's finally come time to him that he needs to make a decision. It's finally time for Jason to enter his year of decision making, which is 12 months in which the new king is able to throw out a number of challenges to Jason to see if he can take the throne. If he survives at the end of that 12 months, then he is able to then step up or rescind his throne to the current king. Called to the current King Barnabas's castle, the king makes it abundantly clear that he will do anything and everything to stop Jason from taking the throne and being the voice of the people. Throughout the coming year, Jason will have to fight his way through the trials, remember his humble beginnings, and rise to be the leader the people desperately need. The storyline of Foreordained, like I said, was quite simple, and it didn't try to colour outside the box at all, but in my opinion, it didn't need to. This was a very classic feeling, clean YA fantasy, which felt comforting as a reader of the genre. I will say this book would be a wonderful introduction to someone of a younger audience who is looking to get into fantasy and not wanting to need or memorize a glossary before jumping into the experience. Now, due to the plot being quite simple, the book needed to shine in other areas, and from a YA perspective, I think the strengths in this book lie in the character growth, friendships, and the lessons in faith. Jason is young at 17, and he has to grow up rather quickly in the current situation that he's in. He feels both wise and incredibly naive as a character at the same time. While he lives apart from his parents, he's still very much connected to them, and the idea of family value shines through the page. As a young boy, he starts off not wanting anything to do with the throne. He does not know why he's been chosen, and he wants to say no from the get-go, and he's been hiding from this for a couple of years now. But throughout the book, we do see him grow as a character as he sees the effects of the current leadership's reign and progress in these devastating ways for the people that he could very well protect. He knows that the responsibility is so much more than him as an individual person, and it was really lovely to see that flourish throughout these pages. It was interesting to see the back and forth that Jason went through within this book on this particular responsibility. So there were times when he would just stick his head in the sand and do whatever a 17-year-old boy would be doing at the time, including focusing on a budding new relationship rather than this daunting responsibility. But sometimes he would then knuckle down and do whatever was in his power to continue learning more about the coming role. It felt quite authentic in terms of this character being a teenager going back and forth on decisions while hormones and emotions are running rampant within his body. Another thing worth mentioning in Foreordained is definitely the friendship dynamics that came out during the book. There are some very healthy and mutually beneficial friendships explored within this story. It was great to see a young boy be openly affectionate with friends of the same sex without it turning into something derogatory. Young men in this book were allowed to genuinely feel for one another, and they would have tiffs without it turning into a full-on blow, and they would continue to learn and grow with one another as the chapters went by. The budding relationship between Jason and a young woman who wanders into the shop is also quite delightful to follow. This was a very clean courtship, for lack of a better word, which felt very innocent and, again, quite authentic to the naivete of Jason and this young girl and this young woman, I should say, as we went through the story. It did not feel forced, it did not feel rushed. These adolescents weren't pushing to do things that they did or did not want to do. It just was allowed to flow quite naturally. It was awkward, it was adorable, and some of the more gender-based roles that we can often see were just left at the door. These were kids allowed to be kids and experiencing those moments for themselves without external pressure. Now, the last thing I will mention here, and something that may turn people off, so bear with me, is the faith aspect of the story. If you are someone who looks for faith in their books, and I'm talking about conversations quite positively surrounding faith and following faith, then this book is going to be for you. At the heart of the story, there is the dragon, and all must have faith in the dragon for their general well-being. This was a factor which was brought up numerous times throughout the book as a reference to faith. When Jason was questioning how or why his actions needed to be a certain way, he was often told that, have faith and it will all work out. There were also references to things like cathedral services, which would need to be attended weekly in order to assist this faith. Now, I will say this didn't take away from the overall story, but it was a strong theme throughout, so those of you who are not interested in religion, you may want to give this one a miss. Now, I will say this didn't take away from the story. It was still quite pleasant for me to read, being someone who does go to church occasionally but isn't overly religious. It was fine. I reached out to the author and actually had a chat to him about it, just to say, you know, is this what you would call Christian fantasy? And the author did say that this does lessen over the course of the trilogy. So if you are someone who likes faith and clean sort of stories, this is going to be for you. If you're someone who really doesn't appreciate that positive spin and undertone of faith, then you may want to give this one a miss. I think Foreordained was very much a case of the right book at the right time for me personally. When I needed something nice and easy for my brain to process, it felt very comforting to me. It was comforting, it was humble, and I enjoyed my time with it to the point where the author was kind enough to send me the next 2 ebooks in the series because I'm interested in continuing on. I would like to see what Jason does next. The book ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I'm quite interested, so we'll see where it goes. That was Foreordained by Aaron N. Hall. Have you heard of this one? Are you going to go pick it up? Have you read it? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I'll catch you in the next video.